What's up, Curationists? This is Brandon Patrick live in the Curation Station, and today we're talking small group jazz. Small groups between 2 and 7 musicians, okay? Now let's go to Me with Glasses to find out exactly what jazz is. Thanks so much, Brandon Without Glasses. Let's break it down. Jazz is the most American art form aside from pro wrestling and stand-up comedy. It's based on blue notes, it's based on swing, it's based on polyrhythm, and it's based on just a good feel. Now, what do all those things mean? Who fucking knows? Let's break it down in the simplest of terms, okay? We're talking small group jazz, so we're talking 3 to 7 people. Let's see what everyone does in that group, all right? You've got your bass player. Now, just for accentuation purposes, I've added a ride cymbal to the bass, but here's how your bass player is gonna function in a typical jazz quartet. You know, he's just giving you your root notes, your chords. He's telling you what key we're in, and he's also giving you straight time. A lot of people don't realize this, but time comes from your bass player. It doesn't come from the drummer. What the drummer does is the drummer accentuates time. So the drummer, they're sort of dancing around the time and showing you, hey, we're here, and they're playing around with it because the bass is, again, giving you that straight beat on every quarter note time. The keyboard player sort of plays an interesting role in that they're giving you a little bit of melody, but they're also outlining the chords that the bass is giving you, and they're also sort of pushing the soloist or the instrumentalist to stretch out a little bit more. So the keyboard might be doing something like... And they're saying, hey, here's where the key is, here's where we are, but I'm gonna make it a little bit more exciting, a little bit more dynamic. The bands that we're talking about today are really gonna focus on that sort of unit. And you've got a horn player on top playing the melody. One of the things that also typifies jazz is that swing feel. And people kind of get confused by swing. What is swing? Is it, you know, a style of dancing? Is it, you know, what the couple next door to me is doing? No. I like to think of a swing as a bounce. So, you know, when a person's playing, they have a sort of lightness in jazz where it's like, you know, just a really cool light touch. One more thing to keep in mind when listening to all of this is everyone's in constant communication with each other. If you see a band, like a jazz band live, they're typically very close to each other. And that's because everyone has to listen to everyone. Everyone's got to listen to the bass player. What's the bass player doing? What key are we in? Where's the time? Everyone's listening for the soloist. Okay, he's doing this. Should we give him another chorus? Should we wrap it up? Is the song almost over? Everyone's listening to everyone, and it's this sort of communal, communistic music. And it's jazz. So the recordings that Me Without Glasses is going to be showing you is going to feature a lot of examples of what I just showed you. The same instrumentation, except with horns on top. So back to you, Me Without Glasses. Thanks, Me With Glasses. That was a concise and brilliant explanation. You truly are a scholar. First up on the show, we're talking the record you have to have, the big hit, the record that if I see it in your collection, I'm like, okay, that's someone who's got an interest in small group jazz. Time Out by the Dave Brubeck Quartet. Now, the reason it's called Time Out is because all of the songs are in different time signatures. Instead of the standard 4/4, you've got songs in 5/4, 6/8, 9/8, 3/4, alternating with 4/4, but it all swings and it's all jazz. This is a great record to have. It's one of the records that is always going to be in print. This is an earlier edition. This is like the first reissue from 1961. The record came out in 1959, but this record you will always be able to find, whether it's on Amazon, whether it's in a record store, a bookstore. This is like basic starter jazz, but it sounds as incredible and as hip as if it was recorded yesterday. I love this record. I love throwing it on in a relaxed atmosphere. You'll probably recognize the big hit, Take 5. You might even recognize like Blue Rondo, a la Turk, this one right here. But a lot of it's gonna be pretty unfamiliar. A lot of it you're gonna be like, this is kind of strange, but it's groovy and it's fun. Paul Desmond plays the alto sax in this band, and it's a very light alto sound, unlike any other alto sound out there, I'm willing to say. If you hear someone that sounds like this dude, it's because they're trying to sound like this dude. He's got a very airy sound, and it almost sounds like a clarinet, but it's an alto sax, and it is an incredible record. Highly recommend you get this one. Now for a bit of a hidden gem, we've got a twofer for you on this one. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach, Charles Mingus, and Bud Powell, Jazz at Massey Hall. This is a Canadian concert, and this is probably one of the finest live jazz recordings of the 50s. You've got Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker up front sounding incredible. And Charlie Parker on this record, a little bit of trivia for you. Charlie Parker is playing a plastic saxophone on this guy. And, you know, he shows up to Toronto and he's like, I don't have a sax. They're like, you need a sax. It's a saxophone playing gig. And he's like, yeah, I don't have one. And they're like, what? He finds a plastic saxophone, plays it better than I've ever played a metal saxophone. It's an incredible record. The reason this is sort of a hidden gem is there's a million repressings of this album, and you want to make sure that you get one that is not based on the Mingus issue. So Charles Mingus, the bass player, originally issued this record, and he was dissatisfied with the sound of his bass. So what he did is he overdubbed himself playing the bass on the record. And so if you get one of those issues, it sounds like there's two bass players playing, and that's not really what you want. You want something like this. This is not an original pressing. This is from a company called Wax Time that does a lot of jazz reissues on 180 gram vinyl. Highly recommend them. They all sound great to my ears. Maybe audiophiles feel something different, but they sound great to my ears. Make sure you get one that doesn't have the Mingus overdubs. That's gonna be your best quality version of this. When people see this in your collection, they're gonna be like, oh wow, that's a surprising thing for someone to have, unless they're really into jazz. And you go, no, I'm really into jazz. You know, boom, credibility. A little bit of trivia for you again. Trivia. Charlie Parker, on most versions, is credited as Charlie Chan, because back then he was signed to a different label and they wouldn't let him perform. So he said, fuck it, I'm Charlie Parker, just call me something else. Charlie Chan, there you go. A little bit more trivia. Charlie Chan is actually a little bit of a diss to Louis Armstrong, who called bebop Chinese music. So Charlie's basically saying, oh, Chinese music? Okay, well, I'm a Chinese guy then. Boom. Another deep cut, a record you probably haven't heard of, but you should. Coleman Hawkins, The Hawk Flies High. Now, Coleman Hawkins was a swing-era tenor saxophone player. Played in the Fletcher Henderson band, played in the Count Basie band. He was, for a long time, what you wanted to sound like if you were a tenor saxophone player in a big band. But here he is in a small group setting. And the interesting thing about Coleman Hawkins, he's a swing guy, swing jazz, not bebop. But he's playing with bebop guys on this album, and he's saying, hey, I can do that. It's just music. I can play bebop. And he's keeping up with guys that are young and hip and on the forefront of bebop. And he's playing just like one of them. It sounds just like any bebop tenor sax. It's incredible. And his ballad interpretation, which is like the slower songs, masterful as always. This is a great record to listen to put on. If you just want to hear a small group of guys swinging, this is an incredible record. He's as fluid as he ever was, but this record is so great to get. Highly recommend it. This is a reissue. I think it's a reissue by the label Riverside. I don't have any other identifying markers, but relatively easy to get. I think I spent like 20 bucks on it. Highly recommend it. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it streaming Great record. Finally, this record can be found on streaming, but it is not available on vinyl anymore. They're not pressing anymore for whatever reason. I think this should be in circulation forever, just like Time Out is, but Wynton Marsalis, Standard Time. In this album, the cover tells you everything you need to know. Very traditional, classical font, almost traditional looking dude. He's wearing a tuxedo, he's got a watch, that's a gentleman. You'd let your daughter go on a date with this guy, but little do you know, he's a jazzer through and through. Wynton Marsalis is one of the most controversial musicians of the modern jazz era. And the reason for that is he's got possibly the most brilliant trumpet technique we've ever seen in one guy. He's got high notes, he's got fast runs, he's got inventive phrasing, he's got melodic playing, his ballads are amazing. Everything he does very, 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 very well. But he's very traditional when it comes to jazz. He doesn't believe in electric basses, electric keyboards, any of that. He's very, very, very traditional. So the instrumentation on this album versus the instrumentation on an album like this are gonna be very, very similar. Although this one was recorded in the 80s and that was recorded in 1953. He's a very traditional player. And a lot of people have problems with that because they're like, you can take your brilliant technique and add electronics and different effects and take it to the next level. But he says, no, no, no. I'm more interested in being a purist and reinterpreting standards, which is where we find him on Standard Time. Jazz standards are songs that have been recorded millions and millions of times by billions of players, and those numbers check out. All of these songs, except for like Soon All Will Know and New Orleans, are jazz standards. So you're gonna see these on a bunch of different albums. But the thing is, the versions you're gonna see, maybe they're reinterpreted or the melodies is done differently. Not on this one. He's basically saying, here is the standard interpretation of these songs. On some of them, he gets a little loose with the melody or he does different tricks, but for the most part, he's saying, here's the melody, here is what this song should sound like, and then they go crazy. Very much typical solo head style jazz. One thing of note is there is some tomfoolery that you can talk about. You can bring it up at parties. You go, on Autumn Leaves, every measure adds a beat to the time signature. So it's in 1-1, then 2-4, then 3-4, then 4-4, then 5-4, then 6-8, then 7-8, then 8-8 or 4-4. So that's something, when you listen to it at first, and when I listen to it at first, it just sounds like the rhythm section is speeding up. That's not actually what's happening. What's actually happening is they're playing in different time signatures. So when you listen for that song, you can say, oh yeah, that's what's going on. And it's gonna make you sound more hip. It's gonna make you sound like you're in the know. People are gonna say, where'd you get that knowledge? You can say you got it from the back, or you can say, I got it from Curate. So those are the records I recommend you get if you're looking to start a collection of small group jazz recordings. Once again, that's Wynton Marsalis, Standard Time. Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Jazz at Massey Hall. Might be credited to both, might be credited to the Quintet, but Jazz at Massey Hall, that's what you want. Coleman Hawkins, The Hawk Flies High. And of course, if you're just gonna get one record in the small group jazz space, Time Out, Dave Brubeck Quartet. You might be wondering why I didn't mention the best-selling jazz album of all time, this Miles Davis classic. And that's because on Thursday, it's an all Miles Davis episode. So we're talking Miles Davis small group stuff all episode. So this record is gonna headline that episode. So look for that on Thursday. And if this was informative to you, if this was helpful to you, if I introduced something you didn't know, like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. Let's curate your vinyl collection. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you Thursday.